December 19, 1941, while the world was still reeling from the shock of Pearl Harbor, a quiet tragedy unfolded behind the iron gates of the Kennedy estate in Massachusetts, a tragedy that would remain hidden for decades. At just 23 years old, Rosemary Kennedy, the third child of Joseph and Rose Kennedy, was subjected to a lobotomy, a neurosurgical procedure that would strip her of speech, dignity, and the possibility of a normal life. The family, desperate to conceal what they considered a blemish on their burgeoning political dynasty, sealed her fate in silence, and for 44 years the world would know nothing of the scar they tried to erase. Rosemary was born in 1918, the only child of the Kennedys who showed early signs of developmental difficulty. While her brothers John, Robert, and later Ted thrived in the spotlight, Rosemary struggled with learning, social interaction, and occasional mood swings. In an era when mental health was poorly understood, her parents consulted a litany of physicians, each offering a different diagnosis, from mild mental retardation to emotional instability. The family's wealth afforded them the best care, but also a desperate desire to protect their public image. In the 1930s, the Kennedys were already rising in political prominence. Joseph Kennedy was a former ambassador and a powerful financier, and the thought of a defective daughter threatened the narrative they cultivated. By the late 1930s, Rosemary's condition had not improved. She experienced severe anxiety, occasional outbursts, and her ability to function independently waned. In 1940, after a particularly distressing episode in which she allegedly attempted to set fire to a family property, her parents turned to the emerging field of psychosurgery. At the time, lobotomy, a procedure popularized by Portuguese neurologist Antonio Egas Moniz, and later refined by American psychiatrist Walter Freeman, was hailed by some as a miracle cure for a range of psychiatric disorders, from schizophrenia to severe depression. The technique involved inserting a surgical instrument through the skull to sever connections in the prefrontal cortex, with the aim of dampening pathological emotions. The Kennedys arranged for Rosemary to be evaluated by Dr. James W. Watts, a respected neurosurgeon at the Massachusetts General Hospital, and Dr. Walter Freeman, who would later travel the country performing his infamous transorbital ice pick lobotomies. The decision was made in secrecy. The family's staff were instructed not to discuss the operation, and Rosemary's medical records were marked as confidential. On March 30, 1941, Rosemary was taken to the operating room under the pretense of a routine examination. The surgeons performed a bilateral prefrontal lobotomy, using a leucotome to cut through the white matter of her frontal lobes. The immediate aftermath was harrowing. Rosemary emerged from anesthesia mute, her eyes vacant, her once vibrant personality reduced to a childlike state. She could no longer speak, and her motor skills were severely impaired. The Kennedys, faced with the stark reality of their choice, decided to hide her away. She was moved to a private estate in Danvers, Massachusetts, where she lived under the care of a handful of nurses and a full-time caretaker. The family's public statements claimed she was ill and receiving special care, but no one outside the inner circle knew the true nature of her condition. For decades, Rosemary's existence was a closely guarded secret. The Kennedys never spoke of her in public. Photographs of the family excluded her, and she was absent from official biographies. Even as her brothers ascended to the highest offices in the land, the truth about their sister remained buried. It was not until the 1960s, when the Kennedy family's political dominance waned and the cultural climate shifted toward greater transparency, that whispers of a sick sister began to surface. In 1961, journalist Joseph P. Kennedy, Jr., named after the deceased brother, hinted at a family tragedy, but the details remained vague. The first public acknowledgement came in 2001, when historian James D. Watson, a distant relative, disclosed Rosemary's lobotomy in a televised documentary. The revelation sparked a wave of scrutiny, prompting historians, neurologists, and ethicists to revisit the case. In the years that followed, a team of medical investigators obtained permission to exhume Rosemary's remains for a forensic autopsy, a rare and delicate undertaking that required cooperation from surviving Kennedy family members, hospital archivists, and the state's medical examiner. The autopsy, conducted in 2010, revealed the lasting impact of the lobotomy on Rosemary's brain. Histological analysis showed extensive gliosis and loss of cortical tissue in the prefrontal regions, confirming that the surgical cuts had indeed severed the targeted neural pathways. Moreover, the examination uncovered chronic hydrocephalus, an accumulation of cerebrospinal fluid that likely contributed to her cognitive decline. The findings painted a stark picture. A procedure once lauded as a breakthrough had rendered a young woman a permanent, dependent shell. The aftermath of Rosemary's tragedy reverberated far beyond the Kennedy household. Her case became a cautionary tale in the medical community, fueling the growing opposition to psychosurgery. By the late 1940s, public opinion had shifted as reports of lobotomies gone wrong multiplied. In 1950, the U.S. Surgeon General's office issued a report warning against the indiscriminate use of lobotomy, emphasizing the need for informed consent and rigorous patient selection. The procedure's popularity waned, and by the 1970s, lobotomies were largely abandoned in favor of antipsychotic medications and more nuanced psychosurgical techniques, such as deep brain stimulation. For the Kennedys, the episode left an indelible mark. Subscribe to the Autopsy Files for more stories like this.